Welcome to our first tutorial about creating a web application. Let's select File, New, and Website. The New Website dialog window opens. From the Templates drop-down menu, select .NET Framework 3.5. I'm going to choose an ASP.NET website. Under Language, be sure to choose Visual Basic and click OK. I'm assuming you're more or less familiar with HTML code and that you've already studied the first volume of this course, where I explained the concepts of Visual Basic syntax. You'll need some familiarity with HTML as well as the Visual Basic language in order to create web applications in Web Studio and to best comprehend this part of our course. Here in our code page, we see some familiar HTML syntax. There's the beginning and end of the header and body. At the top of the page is a line of code that we'll look at in a minute. At the bottom we have Design, Split, and Source tabs. With the Split tab, we can view the page in both source code and design views simultaneously. It's a very convenient view. And it's a very similar concept to working in Front Page or Dreamweaver, both HTML editors. Here's our toolbox. Let's go to the Standard branch and grab a label. We'll drop it here in our table. Let's grab a button and drop it next to our label. Left button. Now the button's highlighted. Click the left arrow again and enter. Let's go ahead and rename our controls. We'll expand the Properties window a little bit. Let's name our label LBL1. And select the button. Let's call our button BTN1. Let's put a caption in the text property of our button. Let's say, "Hello World." Now let's double-click on the button. And let's minimize the toolbox. And let's enter some code. LBL1.text equals . And then inside our quotations, we'll type "Hello World." Okay. As you've probably already noticed, the syntax is very similar to what we worked with in the first volume of this course. You'll recognize the inherits class and the click event procedure here for button 1. You may have also noticed that we don't type in the code directly into the web page. We're using a separate file, aspx.vb. If I go to the source, we see 2 lines of code that Visual Studio has created for us, one for the label and one for the button. Between these 2 lines, we've got 2 breaks, just like in regular HTML. We'll talk more about this later, but for now, let's go ahead and test our application. Click Run. You might get some warning message. Just click OK if that's the case. It's possible that you need to disable some settings in your browser. Go to Tools, select Internet Options, and check Disable Script Debugging. Let's cancel out for now. Let's click our button, and here is our resulting text. Hello World. Now right-click and view the source code. As you can see, our Visual Basic code was replaced with real HTML. In the notification area, at the right of the screen, you see that Visual Studio started the ASP.NET development server. You basically don't need to install a local server or anything like that. Visual Studio does it for you automatically. As you can see, it uses port 1422. That's for security purposes, basically. It accesses your website through random ports. Double-click on this icon. The ASP.NET Development Server panel will open. We see here the root URL, the port, the virtual path, and the physical path. The physical path is where our files are located. The virtual path is the path to the virtual directory created by the server. We're going to be looking at servers later in this course. Let's minimize this and close Notepad as well. Back to Visual Studio. And let's click Stop Debugging. I want to add one more page. Let's expand the Solution Explorer panel a little bit. Right-click and select Add New Item. The Add New Item dialog window opens. We've got a lot of templates to choose from. We're going to be looking at many of these in subsequent tutorials in this course. For now, let's look at what happens if we place Visual Basic code in the same file. Select the VB language. Let's accept the default name and click Add. Once again, we see the HTML code as in our previous example, but you've noticed that the first lines are a lot shorter. What's happened is that they don't contain the reference to the outside source. We don't have the default .aspx.vb file here as we did in the previous example. Now let's go back to Design View. Let's expand our toolbox. And I need a label. I'll drag and drop it in this cell. I also need a button. I'll drag and drop it as well. Now let's rename our controls appropriately and provide them with useful captions. We'll call our label LBL1. Select the button. Now let's rename the button BTN1. And let's change the text property on the button. We'll have it read Hello Again. Click outside to register your changes. Let's debug our program again. Here's our web page. When I click my button, nothing happens. Basically, I forgot to write the code. Double-click. And let's type something here. lbl1.text equals hello again. Fix my typo. You may have noticed we're writing our Visual Basic code in the same place as our HTML code. We're ready to run again. Let's click Debug and let's click the Hello Again button. This time the code is executed and we see the Hello Again message. Let's return to Visual Studio. We'll stop debugging. And this concludes our first tutorial about creating a web application using Visual Studio.